Roll call, please.
Hannah here.
Johnston here.
Lorick here. Gavich here.
Guzikowski here.
Seifert here.
Chandler here.
Could everybody please look over the January 23rd minutes, please? There are no questions or corrections. Motion, please.
Seifert moves to approve the minutes of January 23rd, 2018.
Guzikowski will second.
Roll call.
Hannah, A.
Johnston, aye.
Lorick, aye. Gavich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Significant common council actions.
There were no significant common council actions at the last meeting.
Thank you, Carrie. Moves us to item 5, the tax increment financing. We have a public hearing. We will do 5A first on TID 14 for project plans and boundaries. Doug, are you taking Carrie? So many choices here to choose from.
Read the official notice into record. Notice of public hearing, City of Oak Creek, Wisconsin Plan Commission. Please take notice that a public hearing will be held at 6 p.m. or thereafter on February 13th, 2018 in the Common Council Chambers in the Oak Creek Civic Center, City Hall, 8040 South 6th Street by the City of Oak Creek Plan Commission on the proposed creation of a tax increment district, number 14, and tax incremental district, number 15, City of Oak Creek, Wisconsin, the proposed boundaries thereof, and the proposed project plan for the districts. The purpose of TID 14 and TID 15 is to provide financing for new infrastructure and to promote economic development in blighted areas of the City of Oak Creek as defined by Wisconsin Statute 66-1331 sub 3A. Proposed project costs identified in the project plans include cash grants that may be provided by the City of Oak Creek to owners, lessees, or developers of land within the proposed TID 14 and TID 15 pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 66-1105. The purpose of the public hearings is to hear those persons who wish to express their opinions for or against the creation of TID 14 and/or TID 15, the boundaries of the districts, and the project plans. A map and legal description for each district and copies of the proposed project plans can be viewed at the City Hall by appointment, 8040 South 6th Street, Monday through Friday, between the hours of 7:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. A copy will be provided by request. Any persons with questions regarding the proposed TID number 14 and/or TID number 15 and/or the project plans may call the Planning Department 414-766-7000. The proposed TID number 14 and 15 boundaries were shown in the maps located within the City of Oak Creek, Wisconsin. Dated the 17th day of January 2018, Catherine Ruski, City Clerk, City of Oak Creek.
Thank you, Carrie. As Carrie noted, this is a public hearing. We will make 3 calls. Anybody wishing to speak, please approach the podium. We do have sign-in slips to the side over there if you're wishing to speak. Please fill it out with your name, address, and anybody wishing to speak. This will be the first call. Good evening, Arden. That's okay. Neither am I.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to have the presentation prior to comment?
Please. Arden will get you as soon as we get the presentation done.
So the proposed TID 13, or 14, which is located on the screen, highlighted in red, involves 3 parcels, a total of 10.5 acres. It is proposed to be a blighted district per the statutory definition. The proposal would include redevelopment with manufacturing type uses. And prior to the presentation by Vanderwall, I will just say that there is a suggested motion that the Plan Commission adopts Resolution 2018-02 approving the project plan and boundaries for tax incremental financing district number 14. I will now turn it over to Dan Johns from Vanderwall and Associates for a presentation on the project.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a presentation that kind of covers each one of the districts individually, but some of the background information holds for both. Today is the Plan Commission's public hearing, provided that there is a favorable response from all of you, and with any changes that may be necessary, the project plans will go in front of the City Council at their March 6th meeting, with final action by the Joint Review Board anticipated sometime in early April. Many of you will recall the elements that are required within a TID project plan from the process that yielded the Lakefront District that was adopted last spring. But just as a quick review, the project plans establish the boundaries for each TIF, declares the type of district and the number of years that the TID would be in effect, determines the project costs and expenditures that are allowable under each project plan, projects potential development that would occur within the district and the value of any new development that occurs. It includes a financial feasibility section that finds that the increment that is generated within the district is sufficient to pay for the project costs. It demonstrates a but-for finding, which I'll say a little bit more about in a second, and has a consistency finding with the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan recommendations for the parcels within each district. Specifically on the but-for test, that is a finding that absent the use of tax increment financing, but for the development that is anticipated within the district would not occur at the type, intensity, or the timing that is envisioned. And there should be one or more public purposes that are attached to that development, which could include blight elimination, diversification of the tax base, job creation, social hazards, environmental cleanup, and other public infrastructure improvements. Specifically, the purpose of TIDs 14 and 15 is to advance site-specific remediation for a number of blighted parcels within each district and to provide for public improvements. This is meant to stimulate some near-term development and redevelopment growth in the TID areas along Rawson and Drexel Avenues along 6th Street. This is primarily in the form of redevelopment incentives to incentivize several developments that have been agreed upon by the city through the use of term sheets, and supports complementary uses within districts that are starting to change over in the longer term. TID 14 specifically is at the northwest corner of Rawson and 6th. It's 10.5 acres made up of 3 parcels and is vacant industrial. There is likely contamination at the site. It's underutilized in its current form. The former site of a heating oil business. Its current base value is about $640,000. The entirety of the district was found to be blighted through a visual survey that was conducted. This allows us, provided that at least 50% of the area of the district is found to be in need of remediation or is considered blighted, that provides for a term of up to 27 years. The redevelopment that is proposed for this area in the form of a new manufacturing facility is estimated to provide at least $10 million in new incremental value over and above the current base. And should the district be left over for the entire 27 years, it would generate about $5.7 million in tax receipts. But we anticipate that the districts would be closed well prior to that. This is a sketch of the redevelopment concept that's envisioned for the property, about a 180,000 square foot manufacturing facility. TID 15 specifically sits just north of where we are right now. It's made up of 4 parcels of about 6 acres. The parcel nearest the corner is a mini storage warehouse. There's parcel number 2 is the former metal spun industrial facility, which is currently vacant, and then there's a number of heating, HVAC, and light industrial uses on the parcels to the east. The base value of that is just south of $2 million. It was also found in its entirety to be blighted. Over the entire 4 parcels, we anticipate that there could be up to $5 million in new incremental value that could be created during the life of the district, and should that district be held open for the entirety of the statutory period, there could be up to $2.7 million or so in tax receipts. But that one is also anticipated to close earlier than 27 years. This one is actually envisioned as a phased redevelopment, that the parcels to the west would be redeveloped as a grocery store and retail outlet. within the next couple of years. And following that, this is a little bit more speculative, but should those properties be made available for redevelopment, we think that another $1.5 million or so could eventually be generated off of those sites for a total of about $5 million in the next 4 or 5 years. In a general sense, there are a number of project costs that can be incurred under these project plans. They include, but are not limited to, certain kinds of capital costs, including public infrastructure, property assembly and relocation, demolition, site prep, remediation, planning and engineering, legal costs, marketing, for projects and concepts within the TID, cash grants with appropriate development agreements in place, and then other administrative costs related to ongoing financial management of the districts. Specifically for each district, since these are so narrow in both size and in scope, we envision that the costs associated with each one will be limited mostly to incentives, administrative costs, related financing costs and interest, and some nominal amounts for some railroad bridge improvements that kind of serve as gateways into the areas surrounding each district. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bridget to say a little bit more about the financials of each.
I'll jump in first and just kind of set some groundwork. Andrew Vickers, City Administrator. I really wanted to provide some more specificity with these projects, as well as let the Plan Commission know exactly what the staff and the City Council's goals are with this. So for some general comments, I would say, and reiterating what Dan had mentioned, these projects are about blight elimination in the community, aesthetic and environmental contamination with respect to each of these properties. I would also say that these tax increment districts are really, we've used the term poster children for tax increment financing. If you look back at the impetus of the TIF laws in the late 1970s, blight elimination, urban renewal, that was why tax incremental financing became available to local governments, and these two districts really do well at satisfying in a tidy fashion the but-for test for the Joint Review Board as well as the Plan Commission. As we are looking at blight, environmental remediation and blight elimination in the community at some pretty key trafficked areas, highly visible areas, we're not motivated necessarily by our traditional metrics of jobs and tax base. As you saw, the value increment, while nothing to sneeze at, isn't what we've have in other tax increment districts. We're obviously have those metrics of jobs and tax base, but really the impetus for and interest for the city is the blight and aesthetic elimination in the community, and less so about tax receipts. And what you'll find is those project costs that we're looking to utilize tax increment assistance for are exactly for those environmental cleanup costs, those raising and removal of outmoded buildings, not development cash incentives or anything along those lines. And that's what I wanted to get into more precisely in just a second here. Also reiterate a point, when we can, the city absolutely covets the ability to close these tax increment districts early and thus getting them back on the general property tax rolls of the city. You'll see that if things go as we project them to, and because these are rather simple in scope, projects are very well defined, that we're projecting tax increment district 14 to be closed in 15 years of a 27-year statutory life, and 15 we could probably close out in about 12 years based on what we're seeing in the financial feasibility. So more specifically, TID 14, I don't want to sugarcoat it. It's a nasty property. It has a very nasty environmental history. And we have identified a developer identified itself willing to take on the environmental challenges of the property. And again, the TIF assistance is being used exclusively for those cleanup efforts. There was a site investigation done independently by the developer, which was also verified by the city's environmental engineering firm in terms of what actions need to be taken and the associated costs. So there was a check and a balance there, and the TIF assistance again is going for those environmental remediation costs. So as we know what these projects are more typically than we would say in a phased business park where we have some unknowns into the future, we have some we have some key deal terms ironed out for an upcoming development agreement. I'll just share those with you now. In this TID 14, there's an upfront city grant to the developer, as well as a pay-go to the developer. The city grant portion, upon verification of the $10 million plus in increment, is a city grant of $1,081,250. And then in the back end, on a pay-as-you-go sharing of tax increment generated by the new construction, the manufacturing building, the city will pay up to $880,000. So those are based on, again, actual environmental remediation costs. If they don't spend that much money, those amounts go down proportionally in terms of the city's assistance in that regard. In each of these districts, and you've seen these in the past, there's also an annual administrative fee to the city for Bridget's time and auditing purposes and other administration of the tax increment district, reporting with DOR, those types of things, in the amount of $7,500. And as Dan mentioned earlier, one of the kind of the cool things that we would like to do when increment allows in this district, both of these districts, is a $75,000 budget to rehab those lovely railroad overpasses that we see on Rawson and Drexel. So more to come on that in the future for the city. Shifting gears to TID 15, as Dan mentioned, currently houses metal storage buildings and an outmoded a vacant industrial parcel, a building. Not exactly the level of investment that we see across the street here in Drexel Town Square. And I joked at the Joint Review Board meeting, I literally look out of my window in my office to the arch at Drexel Town Square into the metal storage building in the former metal spun building. And that's my viewpoint right down Main Street. So the actual cleanup for this parcel is in terms of raising asbestos removal, raising the buildings, removing all of the material from the buildings, and some on-site environmental stormwater work, is about $1.2 million. The city's assistance in this is just for the two western parcels you see on your screen, is a pay-as-you-go only assistance of $525,000. What also informed the city's appetite to really leap at this opportunity, there is really exorbitant land costs that the developer is having to pay per acre for this, for these two parcels. The first two western parcels are under contract, north of $950,000 per acre. Why is that? Well, the metal storage condominium business is doing well, presumably, and they don't have to sell. They probably make money, cash flow every month, and they're very happy with where they're at. So when you look at that, the developer's having to step in and pay the value of the business and the loss of income, as well as the dirt, the underlying dirt. The present property owners, of course, don't see it as, well, my land's only valued as vacant land. So that's really something that is an opportunity now, as at least the two western parcels have been assembled and come under contract, to really determine the timeline for the city to eliminate some of this blighted unaesthetic property. So as I mentioned, the city grant would be a $525,000 pay-as-you-go only. And again, there will be a $7,500 administrative fee that comes out of the increment before the pay-go is paid to the developer. As Dan mentioned, we're looking at a medium-sized retail grocer on what's labeled as parcel 2, and then a 6,100, give or take, retail outlet building. Could be potentially some medical office use in there as well. That's not that defined. The developer has gone down the road of securing the retail grocer. The only true unknowns in either of these two districts rests with the parcels to the east here in TID 15, proposed TID 15, which is the former Roth parcels. We as a staff have angled and wanted to make sure that these properties were all redeveloped at one time. However, Roth as an existing business needs a place to go before they can sell their property, because it's not like they want to close down their shop. So discussions are active with the developer. We are planning from a site use, land use, which the Plan Commission will see in a few weeks here, to ensure that we're planning for that being a cohesive development in the future. But the parcels to the east haven't been under contract. So in terms of the project costs associated with the parcels to the east, we're showing in the project plan a budget of $225,000 for what we might encounter with removal of those buildings, any underlying environmental issues. And lastly, in TID 15, again, a $75,000 budget for rehabilitating the overpasses of the railroad overpasses on Drexel. Again, TID 15 has a statutory life of 27 years, but we're looking at, as you see in the pro formas, we're looking at probably closing this out in 12 years or so, getting it back on the tax rolls. Those elements really went into that's the financial feasibility piece. So we'll be happy to answer more questions about the financial feasibility, and Bridget might have something to add in that regard, but that's really the makeup of it and the deal terms associated with the financial feasibility.
Well, Andrew gave all the good news. Dan, could you go to slide 17, please? So this slide is looking specifically at TID 14, or proposed TID 14. And you can see the yellow line going across, showing what Andrew has already said, that we can feasibly close this district in 2032. You are also going to notice that there's a $51,000 fund balance at the end of that year in 2032 that would go back to the taxing jurisdictions. But you see in blue the grant for the proposed general obligation borrowing, but you also see what's called the MRO PAYGO, which is your municipal revenue obligation. Again, in Oak Creek's recent past, we have not had these MROs, or what we call PAYGO, in the actual TID plans, because we haven't been as far along with having ready developers and having some of these term sheets prepared at this point. So that's why you're seeing the language in here. That's why you're seeing that information. This is not new to us. It's just new that it's in the project plan and not coming later in the development agreement. Excuse me. Slide 18, please. So looking now at TID 15, same concept here. We are looking in 2029 at closing early with $20,000 for the fund balance, and you see those MRO, or municipal revenue obligation payments again. Looking at slide 19, and then, oh, are we? There we go. Sorry, I'm not on my computer. We are looking at the impact of the taxing jurisdictions after the TIF district is closed, with that additional increment for right here, TID 14, and then the next slide is 15. Back to Dan.
That pretty much covers it. But with that, we're happy to lead the discussion here amongst yourselves and to hear from the public, and we'll take it to council, provided that you have a favorable response here.
Thank you very much for that. I think you've covered quite a bit, but we do have one speaker, and we did have the first call. So, Mr. Dagner, if you'd like to come up now, please.
Arden Degner, 8540 South Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm puzzled why TIF 14 hasn't been called a brown field. Because I remember years ago, large vertical storage tanks for oil delivery. business, and is the brownfield money not available anymore, or has it been already done by a subsequent owner of that property?
Mr. Deckner, certainly, I mean, whether you call it a brownfield or a blighted district, it's, as the city administrator described it, pretty nasty stuff there. And certainly, it would be the brownest of brownfields if we had to go that make that description. And in fact, the tools that are available for brownfield development have already been utilized to a certain extent in the site investigation with site assessment grants. And Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong, but to the extent that there might be other tools available for brownfield redevelopment and remediation in that site, certainly the city and the developer will avail themselves of those opportunities.
Because I can certainly recall that area. It was oil trucks were going in and out of the area, and certainly, to me, it would be classified as a brown field, and it needs redevelopment, and especially that railroad overhead it's too bad we can't put the city of Oak Creek with a big logo on the side of it instead of that rusty old steel work that they have. So I'm in favor of any way we can improve that. Now, again, to 15, I'm curious as to what kind of relocation that you're going to provide for Roth Heating. They've been a sturdy and a reliable part of this growing city, and I just I'm concerned that we're going to, by this action, going to wipe them out. Is there? Are they going to relocate, or are we going to wipe them out completely?
Arden, we're going to let Andrew handle that because talks are ongoing.
Yeah. So this is a cooperative relationship being established between the city, the developer, and Roth. This is not there's no designs on utilizing eminent domain or anything along those lines. If Roth decides that they want to stay there for time immemorial, then they stay there and operate their business there for as long as they wish to. If there is an opportunity, if they seek out and find an opportunity to set up shop somewhere else, and they work a land deal with the developer, that will be in a cooperative setting. It won't be any eminent domain or anything along those
So
lines.
they're not going to be given any relocation assistance, and this bothers me because they're located conveniently in the center of Oak Creek for years. And I object to this kind of a treatment of one of our stalwart service industries.
Thank you for that, Mr. Dagner. Carrie, you have something?
I just wanted to point out that we are still only open on TID 14, so comments for TID 15 will come when you open that hearing.
So again, we'll take it that way, but we did cover both in the presentation. So again, that was the first call, TID 14. Second call. Third call and final call. Okay, seeing no more, we will close the public hearing and we will open it up to questions from the council. Brad?
Mr. Mayor, if you could actually just proceed to the public hearing for TID 15, and then we'll take the next.
You want to take them both at the same time then?
Since they're so
questions from the
interrelated.
council?
Since they're so interrelated and
Okay.
the presentation went together, I think we should go forward with the public hearings first and then considerations following.
With the questions on both. Okay, suggestion taken. We will now open the public hearing on 5B. It is on TID 15, the project plan and boundaries. Carrie, you want to read it?
If there are no objections, the same notice that was read into the record for TID 14 is still valid for TID 15.
Okay. Presentation, anything to add that wasn't in the first presentation? Okay. We'll open the public hearing. This is the first call on TID 15. Second call. Third and final call on TID 15. Okay, we will now close the public hearing on 5B for TID 15, and we will open it up for questions and comments from the council concerning both TID 14 and 15. Fred?
Okay, I have a question on 14. Isn't the owner or the previous owner of that property responsible for the cleanup of that contamination that he caused? And how does that fall under the city's responsibility?
Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, I believe counsel for the developer is here and has been engaging in those discussions for several months now. If you could have.
Yep. Certainly. We will bring him up, Fred. Name and address for the record, please.
Sure. Attorney Andy Skarowski, SKWIERAWSKI. Although I have to say Oak Creek is probably one of the communities where I don't have to do that as much. I'm with the law firm of Freebert, Finity, and St. John, 330 East Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53202. So to your question, Commissioner, yes, we have looked into and are investigating whether or not there are responsible parties in the past. Unfortunately, as is often the case, we've run into corporations that are defunct, corporations that are bankrupt. It is actually the purchase agreement that is occurring is between the developer, my client, and the bank that's foreclosing on the current owner of the property. And as a result, we've done our due diligence. We're still attempting because as is known, we're working with, as Doug said, the WEDC and the SAG grants. We're still attempting to make sure that there's no chance that there's anybody else we need to go point at who might be a potentially responsible party. But to date, we've been unable to find someone who we could point to who is viable, who could say, you know what, yeah, it's your fault and you need to pay for it. The developer is basically operating under the assumption that, you know, it's a blighted property and we're going to do whatever we have to in order to get it to the point where the development can be made.
If I could further answer your question, if in the event, as is a feature in the development agreement and something I mentioned earlier, in the event there are other responsible parties or the developer otherwise doesn't spend the dollar amount that we've budgeted in this tax increment district, the city then does not expend those dollars either. So again, if there are other sources of funds that the developer doesn't have to pay for, if you will, or other responsible parties, and in turn the developer doesn't have to pay for them, the city's assistance in that regard is proportionately then deducted.
I'm just worried about the city taxpayers being responsible for somebody that caused the problem, and now we have to take care of it.
Anything else, Fred?
It's
Commissioner Chandler?
Okay, can you provide a little more information about the company that will reside on the property for TID 14?
TID 14 is a speculative manufacturing, warehousing, distribution facility of 180,000 square feet. There have not been tenants identified for the building at this time.
And can you provide more information on why a TID for manufacturing warehouse? I understand the property is considered blighted. However, I know we've had some other properties that were of a concern but did not receive a TID.
So in a nutshell, the property conditions are what the property conditions are. the property conditions are what they are today, they will be tomorrow. And they would be the same remediation efforts, whether we as a city or in partnership with a developer, we're looking at manufacturing space, or if we were looking at a hotel water park. Those costs and efforts, the efforts and the associated costs remain the same. But overall, I would say, and maybe Director Seymour can jump in or Carrie can jump in, this is consistent with our comprehensive plan for this area. It makes good sense from a land use perspective in the redevelopment proposal makes good sense.
It does, and if I can just kind of add on to that, I think that for those of you who follow the city's relationship and experience with TIF districts, you'll know that we are very conservative with respect to how we approach TIF districts. And in both of these cases, the project costs, with the exception of some of the things on the back end, specifically with the railroad bridge, and should increment permit that, are limited from our perspective. We're not doing this. This is not a giveaway to a developer. It's a means to an end, and that end is getting a property cleaned up that, quite frankly, if we did nothing, if the developer did nothing, it would sit there for the foreseeable future. And even worse, if it's possible to even worsen the environmental conditions there, that would occur, since we know that historically it has been used for questionable activities with respect to dumping on that site. So in my mind, certainly, and I would hope in yours as well, that TID 14 is a wholly legitimate use of the TIF tool that has been afforded to municipalities. And it is a conservative effort on the part of the city in such that we are not overly incentivizing the development. We are honestly, in working with the developer, doing what's necessary to get that property cleaned up and back on the tax rolls. Same thing to a certain extent on 15, although the contamination might not be as noticeable or as dire as it is in 14. It is nonetheless, it is blighted. There are conditions in there with respect to some of the subsurface and certainly with the buildings that warrant some investment by the private sector and the public sector. And for instance, when the city invested itself in Drexel Town Square, we can see the effect that has had on greenfield development adjacent to that, with the Wheaton, the Ascension Hospital, the veterinary clinic, and some of the things that are going on, the Starbucks, what have you. Ideally, and in the perfect world, that would just continue on. But to varying degrees, we have been victims of our success, and the fact that it has really raised land values adjacent to Drexel Town Square to the point where it's a bit out of balance when you're in a redevelopment situation. Is, again, you're not paying for raw land, even though you're not buying metal spun for the building of the business or buying the self-storage for the buildings of the business. You're buying it for the land. And to the extent that that has to be accounted for in the pro forma, it's what it needs to do to get the deal done, and nothing more than that.
I'd like a little more explanation too about the railroad trestles that we're talking about cleaning up. Do we have any detail on that? That's how we are going to do that? Or doesn't the railroad have any say about this?
They absolutely do. And what we did not want to do was foreclose on any options. We don't have a formal plan for what that might look like. That might be a unique community public involvement process. Certainly the railroad will have a say in if and what could be done to beautify. We're really looking at beautification, not just sandblasting and putting on a new paint, coating of paint, and then letting it rust over time again. Maybe featuring in some of the, or factoring in some of the other strategic community goals we have to beautify, provide some public art amenities in the community. We don't have a plan. As it's fashioned in the project plan, this is more of a back end as other investments and things are paid off as the properties are cleaned up. If we have a year held over, we'll put some some love into the railroad overpasses, but certainly the railroad's involved, hopefully the public's involved, and we can do something really cool and progressive when the time
What do
comes.
we talk about cost on that? Do we have a number, the cost for that, or is that?
We just included a budget of $75,000. If, that's a more of a placeholder, probably something substantially less than that. But we just have no idea what we're dealing with really, or what we want to do.
Alderman Guzekowski, anything?
Just out of the two kids, I think I get the blight, and clearly in 14, I can see specifically a need for that. But when we're looking at 15, I have a little bit more of a problem with that one there, but that's my comments right
I'm going to skip to the end to
I think my questions have been already addressed. I was concerned with state 15, especially with the contaminated soil, and it's close to a wetland. So, but you have already addressed that by saying the developer already hired some environmental company to look into this and do the proper coordination. So that's the only question I had on those.
Johnston, anything?
My concern was just with the building values and what's being proposed there, and I believe that's been taken care of with the development agreement.
Alderman Lorik.
With TID 15, I know it was looked at being that Drexel Town Square is a TIF district, doing an amendment to the boundaries. Can you go over what what standout pros there are to creating its own district versus amending the boundaries for this one to encompass that land?
You're right. There was the option certainly to amend the district. Couple of things, reasons why we chose not to do that. The blighted district designation for the standalone TIF gives us some more flexibility with respect to payback and how we approach project costs. And certainly not that we intend to utilize the maximum payback period, but that flexibility is there in the event that is needed. By not doing an extension on 11, which is Drexel Town Square, we did not utilize one of the few opportunities that we have to do a boundary amendment. I think we're limited by statute to 4. We've already done it twice, I believe. So from that standpoint, it made more sense to do a standalone district. And from my perspective as well, it made a lot of sense to really compartmentalize this district by itself for the ease of implementing the development agreement, the project cost, the financial incentives, and so that there are no unintended consequences on the other district in the event that some of these numbers didn't pan out the way we expect them to.
Something additional with regard to amending a district, the parcels across the street still have a base value. So if you were to amend the district, TID 11's assessed value would take a dip because of that base value. So we're gaining momentum, and you can see Drexel Town Square is building out, and at a $1.9 million base value for those properties, that wasn't a risk that I was willing to recommend.
And just one more thing, by it being a standalone district, we changed the timeline of what TID 11 here is at Drexel Town Square. So things are closing out in different years. And again, this one by being standalone had a shorter term.
I think maybe if I could also add something
Yeah.
here. Really what it amounted to was amending 11 and including this development very likely did not allow us to close 11 any earlier. So that was really paramount in my mind from the financial perspective of it is let's get in and get out with a separate TID and get done in 12 years as opposed to when did we do 11? So it would have been about the same year. So.
And then statutorily, the districts would have a life of 27 years. I know the projections show a 15 and 12 year respectively on the districts. I want to think positively, and I guess if development moves a little quicker than anticipated, could they close sooner than the 15 and 12-year timeline? And if so, what is the milestone to close them out? Is it paying off any financing for the improvements?
All of that is dependent on the terms that are within the development agreement. I mean, that's part of it. So your debt has to be satisfied. If we have an obligation to pay the developer to a certain dollar amount, we will have to work through that or defease that debt ahead of time in order to close the district early. So those are items that you have to look at to make sure that all expenses are taken care of at that point.
I really view these timelines that we have with 15 years for 14 and 12 years for 15 as worst case scenarios, because keep in mind, we are not including inflationary valuation amounts in here, and we are presupposing a static mill rate. So if inflationary valuation increases occur, or the combined mill rate were to go up, those two elements factor into a quicker satisfaction of our obligations, and we can close those districts as soon as those obligations are met.
And then one last question on 15, just to clarify for myself, and I guess if people have questions that are listening. I heard it a couple times saying that the land value in that area has gone up and they're having to pay for existing businesses in order to get the land. I just wanted to clarify that the increment is actually only going for remediation costs and not supplementing the increase that they have to pay for the land.
Absolutely right. Our project and the development agreement that will be before the council, we've identified what it is our dollars are going towards. I mentioned the environmental conditions, raising and removing of the buildings, pre-asbestos removal before you can do that. They're looking at project cost of 1.2, and our investment in the two western parcels is 525. So I also want to note, and just for the public record, the city of Oak Creek is not investing in another retail grocer. There's no direct financial relationship with the city and that grocer. It speaks to what I just mentioned, and that is we're paying for approximately half of the cost to ready the property for development. Keep in mind that the developer's paying that inflated price. That doesn't accommodate the additional 1.2 million on top of that they have to invest into the property to put it into a redevelopable state. So that's on top of the inflated land price already.
Great, thank you.
Another quick question.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
So for TID 14, if I understood you correctly, there is a grant being provided for this location. Is that correct?
The developer as well as the city are partnering with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. They have a program called the SAG grant, which is a site assessment grant. The parties have not been awarded that, but that would really be to reimburse the developer for the investigation costs that have already went into the property. And we're more or less, as a city, a conduit for that. We don't have any financial liability to that process.
Okay, so that cost would not have gone into the TID itself?
No, correct.
Okay.
The developer bore that cost. Yes.
So then my question is about TID 15. So they do not have a grant that
Correct.
goes into all the investigation that has already occurred?
The efforts to the project cost for 15 will be for the physical asbestos removal and raising and removal of the buildings, as well as some on-site environmental work in terms of wetland issues and oversizing of stormwater facilities.
Okay, I'm unclear. So once again, why is there a grant for TID 14 and no grant for TID 15?
TID 14, for me, the easiest way to look at it is the environmental issues with TID 14 are in the ground. And so that requires more assessment and research prior to purchasing that property and moving forward. So the testing for in the ground is what the developer has currently partnered with the city and we've applied for the grant and have not been awarded at this time. But that is still a developer-borne cost. We are just partnering to help them coordinate with the agency of the WEDC. TID 15, the environmental issues are above ground. So that's normally something that the developer would be taking care of and the city would not normally have any participation in, aside from what we're doing here, which is trying to help them through that process with the $525,000.
So there aren't any grants available that could minimize how much money is being used per organization? Any other grants?
Yep, there may very well be. We just had never had the discussion about a potential site assessment grant for TID 15. That just didn't come through as an option. It certainly can be.
My concern is just the cost. Because I know for myself, this is the first time I had heard about these options as TIDs. So from the presentation, it looks like it started recently. The evaluation or the project plan began in December. So this has not been an issue for a while. Is that correct?
I would say that we have been working on probably both of these potentials for the better part of 9 months or so. Just trying to get an idea of what the city would be willing to do, what the issues are with the property, having the development community, the developers we have secure rights to the property has taken some time, but certainly just within the last 45 days or so, we've been putting together the documents to kind of execute the plans that we've been discussing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Got one other
Brad,
quick question.
go ahead.
What happens on TIF District 15 if Roth does not move and they actually stay there? What do we do with the TIF district now? And I'm talking a 10-year or 12-year period.
We have no project costs associated with the Roth piece. We have an earmark of $225,000 for whatever it might be that we need to do there. So if the Roth piece doesn't happen, then we haven't expended and we're not in any sort of a deficit position. We're not utilizing that increment speculatively to make the western parcels work by any means.
Does it change the TIF district itself, the time element, or does it still stay the same as far as the time element for completion?
Should stay the same. It should stay the same. There may be a potential where we don't have an opportunity to work with the Roth parcel until 5 years from now. And maybe that moves things back. There's that potential, but it doesn't necessarily have to.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? I guess I'll just weigh in on it, and I'll go to TIF 14 first. Everybody's really explained it, I think, pretty well. Everybody, as Mr. Dagner pointed out through memory, it used to be an old fuel oil site. It's contaminated. It is one of the biggest eyesores on this side of town, arguably maybe the biggest. We have a small window of opportunity here to do two things. First of all, clean it up. It's not going to be any cheaper to wait. Second of all, we have a willing partner that can come in publicly and privately to help accomplish this. And on our end, it's really it's a pay-go situation. So depending on what they find is really the depth we're going to go, and we have a cap on that. So we really have a good situation here to take advantage of this. As far as the spec building goes, they're marketing as to what they feel they can put up cost-wise efficiently and find a renter for that. And again, at 190,000 square foot of office warehouse or whatever it may be, build to suit, I think it's going to be a vast improvement there. Not only that, I mean, if we can accomplish the railroad trestles there at Rawson Avenue, that's a plus to boot. Now, again, on the back end, we're not solely doing this for tax base. We're really doing this for cleanup. But again, we're going to build that tax base. And it's a very short-term TIF. The city, to the best of their degree, they have a great record of managing our TIFs. Our TIFs are checked. We have a joint review board go through it. Our auditors go through it. bonding people go through it. This is a window of opportunity that I really don't think we can miss on TIF 14. Because anybody that's been by the property, again, there's going to be no argument on the assessment of that. I think Bridget laid it out really eloquently that contamination is actually in the ground. Far more expensive to take care of than the above ground stuff that's going on in 15. As far as 15 goes, I think it's been laid out very well. It's the assemblage of property. Greg made some great points about that. This is not about supplementing anybody for the business. This is really just preparation of land. And as Doug pointed out, the outer ring of Drexeltown Square has really blossomed. You just have to look on Howell Avenue and what we have with the veterinarian clinic. Things went on, the sauna got redone. You're seeing it all over. This is just really a continuation of the success we had here. So I think it's well laid out. They gave you the explanations of why we didn't expand TIF 11. I think these are well done projects, are well done for the cleanup that we have going on. And keep in mind, that is the point right now. We have the window to clean these up, and we have willing participants. So to have those two things at once isn't always common. So I think we really need to take advantage of this going forward. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth. Appreciate the presentation. It was very thorough, very well done. So does anybody have any comments?
I think it's a good idea on 14.
Yeah.
We need to clean that up.
Mm-hmm. So again, with that, we will look for a motion on 6A.
Clerk will move that the Plan Commission adopt resolution number 2018-02, approving the project plan and boundaries for Tax Incremental Financing District, TID number 14.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Anna, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Lorik, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Kuzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
And now we will take item 6B, which is review and consideration of the Plans Commission of Resolution number 2018-03, adopting the boundaries for the project plan for TID District 15. Motion, please.
Clerk will move that the Plan Commission adopt resolution number 2018-03, approving the project plan and boundaries for Tax Incremental Financing District, TID number 15.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Anna, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Lorik, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Kuzikowski, no.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay. Moving on to 6C, plan review for site and building landscape and lighting plans submitted by Dr. Christine Hartman, Dr. Christy Tolzman, Hartman and Tolzman DDS for a new dental facility on the property at 820 East Centennial. Carrie?
This is a proposal for a new dental facility on the northeast corner of Mayhew and Centennial, which is in red on the screen here. This is the overall site plan. All dimensional requirements appear to be met in the proposal for site building and for parking. Access, as you can see from the graphic on the screen, is via the existing driveway that is on Mayhew. There is an existing cross-access agreement with that property to the north. There are no other proposed access points that are for this property. Parking is calculated for dental offices at 5 patron stalls per doctor plus 1 for every employee at the peak shift. And that would equate to about 20 required parking stalls for the 2 doctors and about 10 employees per shift. That's been submitted in the information. And the plans show a total of 23 parking stalls. So the parking requirements are exceeded in this proposal. And the setbacks, again, for the parking area appear to be met. The proposed hours of operation for the clinic are 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. As was mentioned in the narrative, they could be extended to Friday hours at a later date if so required. It's a little bit hard to see, but these are the proposed landscape plans that were submitted. We have been in discussions with the consultant for the project regarding the requirements for landscaping on the site. One of the requirements in code is that there is a minimum of 1 ornamental deciduous tree with minimum 2.5-inch caliper for every 35 linear feet of public street frontage, and while that is met along Mayhew Drive, it is not met along Centennial Drive in this proposal. So they will need to add some trees and some additional landscaping along the Centennial frontage. There is also a need for additional parking lot screening on Mayhew Drive between the proposed landscape drifts, and that's just to make sure that the existing or the proposed parking stalls are adequately screened. You need to make sure that the height for those screening plants are also meeting the requirements of code, which is installation and maintenance at least 3 feet tall. And we need some additional details for the height at installation and maturity for the plantings. These are all comments that were provided to the applicant's consultant for their incorporation into revised plans. As a reminder, all mechanicals, transformers, utility boxes, anything like that, those need to be screened adequately, and we would expect those to be shown on the plan prior to building permit applications. However, we have noticed that with a lot of these transformer boxes, they do tend to appear wherever We Energies says they need to be, so it may need to be amended at a later date to make sure that those are adequately screened. As proposed in the conditions of approval, final approval of the landscape plans would be by the Director of Community Development unless the Plan Commission so specifies otherwise. The building itself is proposed to be orange stone veneer in a gray shade. Along with pre-finished engineered wood siding, so something like Nichiha, and glass as the primary building materials. These are the elevations as you can see on the screen. It matches pretty much the architecture of the existing commercial condo buildings that are on to the north, as well as the Azura memory care facility that's even further north of the condo building. Just a reminder that per code, the use of fiber cement or the engineered wood product requires a 3/4 majority approval of the Plan Commission. Also, section 17.1009 states that the facade of a manufacturing, commercial, office, institutional, park building shall be finished with an aesthetically pleasing material, a minimum of 75% of which of the visible perimeter must be finished with an acceptable glass, brick, or decorative masonry material. And as we've said with all these other proposals that come before the Plan Commission using the fiber cement products, it is up to the Plan Commission to determine whether or not the 3/4 or the 75% visible perimeter requirement is met by the use of this product. Also shown on the screen is the proposal for one trash enclosure that's located on the north. It's actually within the existing cross-access easement. We did provide some comments that were received from the engineering department about citing that a little bit further west to move it away from the stormwater pond. That did actually occur. The materials for that enclosure will match the building in terms of the fiber cement and the orange stone veneer. We did recommend as staff that the trash enclosure be located, if not attached to the building, at least closer to the building. Whether or not that actually can occur is something that the consultant was looking into. There was one comment received from the water and sewer utility saying that the plans show a sanitary lateral crossing property lines, which is not allowed, so staff recommends that the consultant work closely with the utility to make sure that all of those requirements are met and that there are no additional concerns once those plans have been revised. On the screen now is a rendering showing the west elevation of the proposed building. This is viewed from Mayhew. And this is the east side of the building that would be seen as you travel westward on Centennial. For your reference, these are existing buildings in the area showing the use of non-masonry materials as siding. This is the Azura facility and existing apartment buildings in the area. Should the Plan Commission choose to approve these plans, there is a suggested motion that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plans for a dental facility submitted by Dr. Kristen Hartman and Dr. Christy Tolsman of Hartman and Tolsman DDS for the property at 280 East Centennial Drive, subject to conditions 1 through 4. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Would the applicant like to come up and say anything about their proposal? Or evening, name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Jordan O'Connor. I am architect with Design to Construct, representing the dentists. Address of our company is N173 W21010 Northwest Passage in Jackson, Wisconsin, 53037. I think Carrie did a great job covering everything. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any additional information you request, but I have nothing to add substantially at this point.
This time I'll turn it over to the commission for questions, comments. Nothing from Christina. Brian's still studying. Greg?
Just a comment, I personally like the look of it. I think it blends in well with the existing buildings that are there.
Very good. Thank you.
Chris?
Looks good.
Fred?
I think it looks good too, but I have a question for Brian. The retention pond that we presently have there, is that adequate enough to handle all that development that we've put on that area along Mayhew Drive?
Yes, it is. That was all planned as that entire development went forward.
Okay.
Yeah. If you remember, there were supposed to be two buildings, like the one that's just north of this one where the Child America facility is. There's supposed to be another one north of that where the Zura site was. So those two buildings in this lot were all included into the detention pond.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chandler? No? I guess from my end, fire? Nothing. I guess from my end, I think it's a really sharp looking building myself. I think it fits. I think it blends well. As far as the fiber cement board goes, I take it you're using it on the siding.
That's correct.
I personally think it's a better looking product than aluminum siding or vinyl. So I actually think it's an upgrade in that regard. Glad to see you're using the 4-inch brick. Usually sometimes we struggle with that. So.
Yep.
And your use of the windows, particularly on the backside where your patient rooms are. Good use of glass, and hopefully it puts everybody at ease. So
I think so.
I'm good with it. Well, some people have anxiety there, so.
Very good. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? No? Okay. If not, motion please on 6C.
Clerk will move that the Plan Commission approve the site and building plans for a dental facility submitted by Dr. Kristen Hartman and Dr. Christy Tolzman, Hartman and Tolzman DDS, for the property at 280 East Centennial Drive with the following conditions. Number 1, that all relevant code requirements are in effect. Number 2, that the plans are revised to include locations for all mechanicals, transformers, and utilities. Number 3, that all mechanical equipment, transformers, and utility boxes, ground, building, and rooftop are screened from view. And number 4, that all revised plans, site building, landscaping, etc., are submitted in digital format for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications.
Kuzikowski, a second.
Roll call.
Anna, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Kuzikowski, aye.
Secret aye.
Chandler, aye.
Great. Congratulations. Good luck. Just to mention on that, signage will come later. Thank you. Moving on, 6D, consideration of a rezone conditional use. Review a request by Dr. Jacob Otters, Lakeshore Veterinary Specialist, to rezone a portion of the property at 9472 South 27th Street from RS3 Single Family to B4 Highway Business. There will be no change to the mixed-use neighborhood overlay district. This is a conditional use for an animal hospital. So, Carrie.
The request to change a portion of the property to B4 is to make that small portion that is currently zoned RS3 or single-family residential conform to the rest of the property so that it can be used as one singular property, and it should be one zoning district. The fact that this is a carve-out is kind of a holdover from a previous zoning in the area. There used to be a large PUD where residential was envisioned in this area, and that obviously changed over the years. Unfortunately, this remnant never changed back. So the conditional use permit application is for an animal hospital on the property, which is highlighted in red. Again, this is the northeast corner of Ryan and 27th Street. This is a conceptual site plan showing the proposed building and the parking. Now, it looks like a lot of parking now. There is, well, you can't see it on the screen. There are designations for future parking because they think that in the future they may have an addition to the building as well. So the comprehensive plan shows this portion of 27th and Ryan as identified for planned business. So this proposal would be in keeping with the current comprehensive plan vision for the area. It's also part of the 27th Street corridor plan, which we've all looked at in some regard for other projects on 27th Street. And it's part of the overlay districts in the area for which have additional design guidelines. And we've been a little bit familiar with that with some of these other projects on 27th Street that were recently reviewed. There were a few updates from the information that was submitted in the narrative portion. So the narrative in your packets didn't change, but the plan did. Some of those updates include access via the existing cross-access easement over the Pick and Save property to the east, and we'll talk about that. There are no additional access points that are going to be proposed or approved for this particular property at this time. The parcel to the north will not be a secondary access point at this time. No parking or truck circulation will occur on the subject parcel, as was stated in the narrative. That agreement or that discussion just didn't come to fruition in terms of having an agreement. And then parking will be designated for current and future phases of development rather than showing one large sea of parking on this property at the start. This is for the Lakeshore Veterinary Specialist, which you may be familiar. It's in the multi-tenant building that is by the Pick and Save property to the east. As with their current location, this is intended to be a 24/7, 365 operation for referral specialty and emergency veterinary care services. They are proposing to have one pet relief area as designated along the back or east side of the property, or building rather. This is not intended to be some place for a dog exercise facility or anything like that. This is simply for patients to be taken out on leash, do their business, and then go right back inside. This isn't intended to be exercise, or there's not going to be any boarding or kenneling or anything like that as part of the services. No other outdoor areas. It's not going to be a daycare. There's no training facility. There's no retail sale of pet products. And there are no on-site cremation services. So if there's any question about that, those kinds of services are offered off-site. It's a contract basis, kind of. Hazardous waste would be handled the same as hazardous waste is handled in a human hospital. And for those of you who are concerned about what would happen with, pets that are deceased, they would be kept in a refrigerated portion of the building that is not accessible to the public until that contract cremation service can remove it. As far as staffing is concerned, that will obviously have to fluctuate based on hospital needs, but they are anticipating at this time 12 full and part-time doctors and 48 staff members. But because this is going to be a 24/7, 365 operation, there's really no peak for determining staff levels and parking requirements. So therefore, what we are considering for the requirements per code, 3 patron stalls per doctor plus 1 for every employee at a peak shift. We're just considering all of the employees as being peak. So in other words, you would be required to provide 84 parking stalls for that first phase of development. And as is depicted on the screen, they are showing 89 with the first phase and 71 as future parking stalls. So they are well in excess of what could be provided in terms of parking. And as you're aware, with the requirements for the overlay district, we do have a little bit more than what is required in the underlying B4 zoning district. And the applicant is well aware of this, and staff greatly appreciates the conversations that we've had in terms of potential design for this building. And that's what you see on the concept rendering on the screen right now. They are looking at doing kind of a combination 2-story, 1.5 single-story modulation of the building as it goes in phases with brick, glass. They're looking at some other decorative elements. They are well aware of the requirements for the overlay district and the requirements for the underlying district in terms of visible perimeter and building material requirements. And staff continues to work with them as the plans for the building design and a little bit of the site design are changed. With that in mind, staff has no objections to either of the requests. We did receive very late this afternoon an email from the property owner to the east representation stating that they believe there is no cross-access easement agreement in place. Staff was not able to do a comprehensive search on this issue. However, the information that we were able to find in a very short time frame was that there is a cross-access easement that is stated on both of the CSMs affecting that property. There is a development agreement that affects that property that references a cross-access easement showing access to this lot in an exhibit. At this time, we would have to say that those kinds of issues are private and would have to be between the two property owners. It would not affect the rezone request. It would not necessarily even affect the conditional use request. It would have somewhat of an effect on the site plan review, however. And I will note one other thing, that there are 2 letters from the DOT from 2004 that required the cross-access agreement for the property between, as stated in the letter, 27th Street and the property that has the existing pick and save development, for what it's worth. But with that, if the Plan Commission agrees that this is an appropriate use for this site and that the rezone is appropriate for this site, there is a suggested motion that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that a portion of the property at 9472 South 27th Street be rezoned from RS3 single-family residential to B4 highway business with no change to the NO mixed-use neighborhood overlay district, with a conditional use permit for an animal hospital after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions that will be prepared for the Commission's review at the next meeting, which is February 27th. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Is the applicant here? Anybody representing the applicant? Would you like to come up and say anything, or again, name and address, please?
Yeah, Jordan O'Connor, N173 W21010 Northwest Passage, Jackson, Wisconsin, 53037. Again, I don't have anything to add unless there's questions on the what's being proposed at this time. You know, the images we see are very conceptual in nature, just as we're on the front end of things, but look forward to possibly having a site plan review in the very near future if this all moves forward as proposed.
We'll open it up to the commission. Questions, comments? Oh, Doug?
Just on a very on a note, we will be exploring some issues with respect to possible cross-access easements as we progress through this process. Recognize this is part of a rezoning at this point in time, and although certainly discussion about conceptual site plans is germane to that topic, I mean it's not something that we would dwell upon at this stage. Suffice to say that we'll work out those issues as part of the future conditional use permit and site plan review. You will receive this evening a copy of a email that was sent to staff this afternoon from the current property owner, the Pick and Save property owner, and they are questioning whether or not those easements do exist. Whether they do, whether they don't, that will be worked out. That has no bearing on land use.
I actually have a couple of questions. I'm not sure who would answer it. Number one is, I understand this is at the corner of 27th Street and Ryan. So does this meet the ordinance for the site distance restriction, making sure that the traffic is not going to be obstructed by this new building there, which has not been there for before?
Well, that specifically, Brian, did this go to the state as a development review?
Not yet, because we don't have an official site plan yet, so it hasn't been forwarded to the state.
So it could be set up back, but as presented here, it could be some side distance issues.
There is a requirement just in the in the overlay district requirements as well as the underlying code for some setbacks. This is showing a building setback of more than 50 feet, 50 feet from the right-of-way, but those right-of-way distances, as Brian said, would have to go to the state whenever we had a more concrete site plan. This is conceptual only.
Question number 2, I see that this is the existing detention pond you have here on that plan?
It's not an existing pond, no, that's
this is
where we
your
would propose.
proposed one?
Correct.
So how are we going to be monitoring this with the adjacent property, making sure that the runoff and that there is no overflow? Has this been looked at?
Not as of yet, I mean, to the full engineering capacity that I think what you're expecting, but safe to say that will all be, properly designed and go through the engineering
Just a
process.
concept.
Exactly, yep.
Okay, just want to make sure.
That's fine, sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Alderman Guzekowski.
Oh, looks good. Conceptually, it's my district.
Commissioner Seipert.
Good.
Commissioner Chandler. Okay. I guess I'll just throw my 2 cents in. As usual, I know it's conceptual. It looks like it lacks green space. It looks like a large parking lot. I'm rather surprised for the 24-hour hospital, but Carrie kind of read through that. This is the gateway to our city on that side of town. So your conceptual building was a pleasant surprise because I thought it was really not gonna appear that way. So that was a pleasant surprise, and I know that may not be the final version, but keep in mind, at our gateways, we are gonna hold at least I will hold pretty firm to the standards there on that prominent corner.
Okay.
Just to the commissioners, and Doug, maybe we will be revisiting 27th Street overlay plan sometime soon, won't we? We really need to dust that off because this is one of our first kicks at the can that we've had along 27th in quite a while.
I think we'll certainly be taking a closer look at the 27th Street overlay districts as part of our more comprehensive review of our zoning code, which we'll be talking about next.
So, as far as business, I'm glad they're flourishing. Just for my own knowledge, square footage, what are they looking to do here for square footage?
The phase 1, roughly the building footprint that you've seen on that conceptual site plan is around 15 to 17,000 square feet.
They did expand out. Which way?
Where we're kind of, everything's trending, conceptually to move kind of mainly just to the east on the northern half, kind of without disrupting the pond. Essentially, it would kind of branch off there, not too far to the north, and really nothing to the west.
I'm glad they're doing well. So, okay. I'm okay then. Seeing no other questions or comments, motion, please.
Seipert moves that the Planning Commission recommends to the Common Council that a portion of the property at 9472 South 27th Street be rezoned from RS3 Single Family Residential to B4 Highway Business. No change to the NO Mixed Use Neighborhood Overlay District, with a condition use permit for an animal hospital after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions that will be prepared for the Commission's review at the next meeting, February 27th, 2018.
Chandler seconds.
Roll call.
Hannah, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Clark, aye. David Chai.
Guzekowski.
Seipert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Great. Item 6E,
Thank
recommendation
you all.
for a consultant. The review selection committee's choice for the consultant services for a comprehensive and zoning ordinance update. It is for the project and recommendation to the Common Council for the award of contract. Who's got this one?
I will take that one. So as you may or may not be aware, I hope you are, city put out an RFP for this project, which is a comprehensive plan and zoning code update, and we did receive 5 proposals by the deadline. We reviewed them, staff vetted them, chose our top 3, which were presented to the selection committee. Selection committee was made up of Department of Community Development, Pete, who is not here, Mr. Mayor. Aldermen, actually, aldermen were not represented on the selection committee. I think that was something that was,
Seibert was with us.
Commissioner Seibert was with us, but I think the aldermen were not available for the selection committee dates because we needed to have interviews during the day. Also, Commissioner Johnston and Communications Coordinator Leslie Flynn. So that was our selection committee. We all reviewed the proposals and we had interviews with the 3 selected consultants. Each one was provided about an hour, maybe an hour and a half for presentation and Q&A. And following that, the selection committee met and unanimously chose Housel Levine Associates as the selected consultant for the project. And in the report that I have here, we had some reasons behind our selection. One of them is that Housel Levine is considered basically a one-stop shop. So they were providing all the consultant services, whereas there were kind of partnerships with the other consultant RFPs. So there would have been more than one firm that we were working with at some point. So some of the perspectives on that were that if you had one firm to work with, you didn't necessarily have conflicts or, concerns about whether or not one consultant was, providing services, another one wasn't, that kind of thing. It added a level of accountability that the selection committee felt comfortable with and lessened the potential conflicts. Also, they're a national firm. They were recognized from the American Planning Association. They've authored several publications. They presented at conferences on topics that are emerging, such as local signage with the legislation at the federal level, how we're implementing that at the local level, what the state implications of those are, innovations in site design, those kinds of things. However, while they are a national firm, they're based in Chicago. So they do have the local and regional kind of knowledge to go along with their national breadth of knowledge. They also have planning and zoning experience in Wisconsin, so they're not completely unfamiliar with the state itself, although they're not located here. And as part of their presentation, they did provide a graphic brochure that was included in your packets with their project scope and approach, and the preliminary understanding of the city's challenges and opportunities. The initial research the selection committee felt was more specific, in-depth, and comprehensive than some of the other presentations that we heard. And many of the areas showed that the consultant did have a solid understanding of what the city's issues could be and what would be addressed in this project. They also included a 1-year cost-free support in their presentation and in their contract for following adoption of the comprehensive plan and zoning code. So what that means is, should there be questions that arise from staff about how to implement or interpret something, or whether the Plan Commission needed additional review, a little bit of training, some of those things, that would be ongoing for up to a year. They were very graphic intensive in terms of their presentation and what they showed in their proposal. The brochure we felt was advanced, clear, and provided a level of professionalism that we were looking for in this project. And planning and zoning are the core of their strengths and principles. So they are a planning firm. They are not an architectural firm. They're not an engineering firm. They are planning and zoning. And they made that quite clear. So all that information was provided to you for your perusal as well. And if the Plan Commission is in agreement with the selection committee's choice, there is a formal recommendation motion that is included in your packet. And that would be provided to the Common Council for approval and award of contract at their next meeting, which would be February 19th. Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Carrie. As Carrie said, I participated in the interviews along with Commissioner Seibert. Commissioner, would you like to share your experience and what we saw there?
I thought they did a very good job, and Carrie really spelled it out exactly what they did for us. So the only question I have is, I talked to Doug about it, is did we talk to any of their references, and how did they rate or kind of put a stamp on this company?
I had a conversation with the planner for the city of Flint, Michigan, and they highly recommended this firm. They said that they were very easy to work with. They worked directly with the two principals, one of which is, he felt, one of the leading graphics persons in the nation at this time. So we're looking at top-notch consulting services here. The one drawback that he said was they were on an accelerated schedule, so they had their schedule on House Seal Levine a little bit. Flint has a unique situation that Creek don't have. They have a literacy issue. They also are dealing with extreme issues that we aren't experiencing here. They didn't have a comprehensive plan for 50 plus years. So this was a major undertaking in an underserved, underutilized area. They deal with things like segregation and the impacts of urban renewal on that area. So, and they're much larger than Oak Creek. They took 18 months just to do their comprehensive plan. So they said the zoning code kind of fell a little bit behind that, although they did commend House Seal Levine for basically providing some services outside of their contract. So for what it's worth, they said that they would highly recommend working with them again, and their unique situation is probably not necessarily what we would experience, but it was nice to hear that they have a positive view of that relationship.
Excellent. I was on that interview panel too, and I'm just going to share a couple of things. There were 3 very qualified firms that came in. We interviewed each of them. Basically, they all got the same questions, same opportunity to present. What really stood out to me about this particular firm is even though they were from out of state, they really came in and did their homework on Oak Creek. They really had a pulse of how our developments come about, where we were headed, our zoning, and where our needs may fall. They're very dynamic in their thought process and how they were going to conduct things. As Carrie said, there were a couple other ones that were working in tandem with other organizations which felt a little disconnected, a little different. This group in particular really stood out and had done their homework. I think Doug kind of summed it up at the end. This was a blueprint for our city in the next 15, 20 years. And he said, what do you want to see from Oak Creek? And in some cases, although they were all very good firms, they were kind of going with the standard thing. And Oak Creek's far from standard these days, so we felt it, we owed it to our citizens to go out there and find the best we could. And through the evaluations, once we got in there and everybody had a preconception of who was who, in the end, it was unanimous. They really did come out on top. So, Doug, would you like to add to that?
Absolutely. I think that we were fortunate enough to have a number of proposals and really 3 very outstanding, responsible and responsive firms that we essentially got to choose from, and many of which we've done business with in the past. And I think that ultimately what impressed the committee was the perspective that an outside the area firm can bring to the community. We obviously have been going through some pretty significant changes, positive changes over the past few years, and we've got some momentum. And the committee felt that this was certainly, while we're respecting the past and respecting how we got there, I think this was an opportunity to really align ourselves with some of our strategic plan goals, and especially in bringing the outside perspective allowed us to really take stock of where we are as a community and really move ourselves forward. So while we had some great options, and I wish we could have worked with them all, we can't. But I think that we'll be well served by the perspective and the professionalism that this firm will bring to our community.
Great. Any questions from those that didn't participate?
I forgot what our timelines were and what was the price tag on it again? I forgot.
Typically about an 18-month time period, 12 to 18 months, within a budget of $160,000.
That's right. Thank you.
everybody was relatively
Yes, the three that were selected were within dollars of each other in terms of their proposed budget.
Well, it sounds like a pretty hefty price tag, and it is. I think that it brings tremendous value to the community. Just giving my recollection that our comprehensive plan back in 2002 probably cost nearly $100,000. So it's a big undertaking. It's something that we as a staff are prepared to work diligently on, and working with you as the Plan Commission over these next 12 to 18 months to really put your mark on the plan as well. And again, as I've often told Carrie, told Pete, told Andrew, this is not my plan. This is your plan. This is how this community is going to shape itself for the next 20 or 30 years. So I think that certainly, and I harp on this a little bit, I mean, we can certainly and we should look to the past to inform our future decisions. But I think that it's really going to provide a great value to this community by getting that perspective from a little bit outside the region.
great. I can't agree more, Doug, and I think we're at that junction. It timed out very well as to what we're doing, what we're looking to accomplish, the growth spurt we're in, and where we're going to be not only in 18 months, but 5 to 10 years. And I think it's going to serve us well as take a look at the zoning. We can't discount the value of that because we have changed as a city. Needs and things are different.
This won't be a Band-Aid approach. This will be, we'll have to rip it off and start over.
Okay. We need a motion on the recommendation then.
Clerk will move that the Plan Commission concur with the Selection Committee and recommends that the Common Council award the contract for the Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Ordinance Update Project to Hausel Levine Associates.
Kuzikowski will second.
Roll call.
Hannah, I.
Johnston, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Kuzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay, before we move for adjournment, and Carrillo's not here, so we're probably stuck, but just a couple announcements for everybody. This weekend is our first Winterfest, our shot at it. So the gods smiled on us and gave us snow. So that's the first step to success, have a winter festival with snow. So it happens this Saturday at Drexeltown Square, 10 a.m. to 4 a.m. Please get out there. There's going to be some dog sled exhibitions, ice sculpting, a lot of things to do for the kids, very family orientated. Please get out there, discover and celebrate Oak Creek. So with that, again, thank you to the staff, very well prepared. Thank you for taking the time to come out. IT guy, Tim, nice job. With that, adjournment.
Clerk will move that the Plan Commission adjourn at 7:38.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Hannah, I.
Johnston, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Kuzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler,
Need to
aye.
ask a question.